everybody. Thanks for watching. My name is Sam and I'm in client services here at the Retirement Group. I moderate these weekly webinars for you. In just a moment, we are going to be joined by one of our senior advisors, Wesley Boudreau, and he will be covering some topics related to the 72T. But before Wesley comes on, I'd like to quickly remind you that although we work very closely with both active and retired clients and potential clients of General Mills, the Retirement Group is not affiliated nor endorsed whatsoever by General Mills. We are a completely independent group of financial advisors here, so please keep that in mind as you listen along with Wesley today. After Wesley's presentation, I will rejoin him very quickly to ask him some of the questions that have come through the Q&A box throughout his presentation. Please stick around if you'd like to hear any of those. And you may see some YouTube cards popping up on your screen as you watch this video. Please feel free to click on those. They will guide you to several of the different complimentary resources that we offer you here at the Retirement Group, such as past videos that you may find of interest or concern for General Mills employees, or the complimentary cash flow analysis that we offer you to get updated on your retirement or to get started on your retirement if you hadn't already had one run. So please take advantage of those. And with all of that out of the way, I'm going to now turn off my camera so Wesley can come on and get started. Hi, Wesley.
All right. Thank you, Samantha, for that introduction. Hey, like she said, we're going to be talking about 72T today and kind of some different options that we come across when we're dealing with retirees that they're retiring earlier. You know, they're lucky for a lot of circumstances because they're getting to enjoy a little bit more time in retirement. But we'll go through what the typical 10% penalty rule is for pre-59 and a half, and how 72T can play into that aspect in order to avoid that. And we'll give you an example as well, and then give you kind of our advice on next steps and how to actually plan for some of these different options. So first and foremost, I think most of us are aware that the primary goal for a lot of these tax deferred accounts, whether it be an IRA, a 401k, a 403b, is you're trying to defer your taxes as long as possible. And once you retire, then you'll start taking distributions and paying taxes on it. Now, in order to actually force you in one way or the other to defer those taxes longer, the IRS puts on a rule of 59 and a half. So generally speaking, across the board, what that means is in order to access your account, you have to wait until you're 59 and a half, or else there's a potential 10% penalty for early withdrawal. And I've got here on this sheet kind of a bunch of the different ways around it. And again, it's not a very simple process, but there are different caveats. And the one we come across the most as a fiduciary and working with individuals retiring from a company and rolling over is the age 55 rule. So be very careful if you're, let's say, between 55 and 59 and a half right now, and you're talking about retiring before 59 and a half, and you may be talking to a firm and they're telling you, hey, let's roll everything over to this IRA so we can manage it for you. They may not be thinking in your best interest. They may be thinking in theirs. So even if you tell me, Wesley, hey, I'm going to go out and get another job, I don't need any money until, I'm 60 years old or older, we still, from a fiduciary standpoint, may tell you, hey, you may want to keep some money in your 401k if you're leaving the year you turn 55 or later, because you can tap into that without the 10% penalty. So that's what the rule is. If you leave the year you turn 55 or later from a 401k, plan permitting, which I don't think I've seen any plans that don't permit it, you're able to tap into that without the 10% penalty. Now, still a 401k distribution, so you've got 20% withholding restrictions and things like that. We can go through it. You also have to be careful because some 401ks are flexible. They give you the ability to take withdrawal every day or every month, and some only let you do one per year. So you need a budget accordingly. Some of the other things that we tend to see are, different items like first-time home purchase, educational expenses, some qualified medical expenses. There's different limits and caps to those. If you've been a highly compensated employee and you've maxed out your 401k, some of those non-qualified portions are exempt from the 10% penalty. NUA is another one that we do a lot of work with the oil companies and a lot of these other companies that have what's called low cost basis stock. Completely different conversation, but NUA is a great treatment there, where you can actually pay taxes on the cost basis and long-term capital gains on the growth. So again, avoiding that 10% penalty, and that's a further discussion to have as well. So the 72T, that's what we're going to talk about today, and the way that works. So let's kind of get into that. A 72T is essentially you agreeing to a payment structure that the IRS sets forward. It's not you can't just arbitrarily pick a number and say, hey, I want to start taking out XYZ, for the next couple of months or a couple of years. What happens is the IRS has a calculation method which has changed over the last year or so to be a little bit more lenient for us. So you'll see on some of these numbers we have in a slide or two, they could be updated, and I'll give you some kind of ideas on where we stand right now. But they take a look at midterm rates and they give you 120% multiplier looking back at the last 2 months to figure out, okay, this is the interest rate or the max interest rate you can use to calculate how much on an annual basis can you take out from your IRA in order to actually avoid the 10% penalty. And in doing so, you have to either take that out for at least 5 years, the minimum, or until you turn 59 and a half, whichever is going to be longer. So let's assume you turn on at 57, you have to take that out for 5 years. So go 57 to 62. If you turn it on at 50, you're going to have to take it out for 9.5 years. You have to go to 59 and a half. Now, if you make a mistake, that's why it's really important to work with a firm like the retirement group who's done a lot of these and understands them, is if you make a mistake and just, you can make a mistake as far as, missing one payment or taking out an extra dollar over what you were supposed to. And the IRS can come back and retroactively penalize you. And I'll go through some examples here a little bit later as to how that may look. But again, it's just the rule of thumb is it can be a complicated situation, and it's really good to structure that by working with a firm and somebody that understands that process as well. But again, this is a way to get around that 10% penalty, assuming that you hold course and you stay the course and do it for those 5 years or 59 and a half, whichever is longer. Now, look at an example here. Let's take a look at Cynthia in this case. She decided that she's got enough money set aside. She's got lower expenses. She's got a pension coming due at about 60 or so in this case. And she's got about $800,000 set aside that's liquid, if you want to call that. Maybe a combination of her 401k, another IRA, maybe a lump sum pension she took from somewhere else in a transition. And her question is, okay, I'm 52. I want to enjoy myself. Maybe she's got longevity issues, has some concerns about not making it into her, her 80s or late 80s or 90s. So she wants to enjoy herself now. But if she were to just go ahead and start tapping into her 401k or into an IRA, she's going to be paying taxes plus a 10% penalty. So in order to get around that, the question becomes, okay, can we or should we structure a 72T, which again is substantial and equal periodic payments for the next, in this case, 7.5 years, because she's 52, has to do it till age 59 and a half. And if she does that, she has to stick to that and not make any changes to it. So the question becomes, how much can she actually take out in order to fund her needs? Now, these numbers, these examples were run a while back. So again, the numbers change. To give you an update, I just ran this morning, but if we look back at the December rates, she could get as high as about 55,000 or so out of an $800,000 portfolio. But for a quick rule of thumb, one of the things the IRS did, which was great last year, was they changed it to, it can be as high as 5%, which is kind of a flat rate, or the 2-month prior 120% midterm multiplier. So I don't get technical on that, but if we look back at 2 months ago, that was coming in at 5.79%, and it's already dropped down. So it's actually below 5%. That's, I think, 4.7 something, maybe 4.8%. So at a 5% calculation method, she could get about 50,000 now. So that does not mean that she has to take that full 50. What would happen is we'd have a conversation and say, hey, look, Cynthia, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself and put the entire $800,000 into a 72T program, because if you do that, you can't deviate. You can't make any adjustments. And if you make a mistake, then you're going to have to come back and pay the penalties in there. So in that case for her, we might back out. I'm doing the math in my head right now, but it might be that if she really needs $40,000, maybe we only need $620,000 of it in order to generate that. So we may split them up. We may say, okay, let's take that $800,000. Let's keep $180,000 in the IRA that's going to be geared more towards growth until 59 and a half and beyond, and use 620,000 and let that be the portion you can tap into. Doesn't mean it doesn't grow. It has no bearing on the investment side of things. It just means that's the amount you're allowed to take out each year. And if she comes into a situation where she needs to take out more, she can tap into that 180. And we go through some examples there as well. So let's take a look at example of how this could play out. And I know there's a long list of assumptions here, but just to give you a quick summary of those, we're going to assume in this calculation method we did before was that she's in a 35% tax bracket, maybe between federal and state and everything. A pretty good assumption of a growth rate in this IRA. So at 8%, how much would that look like over time? And really the key thing I want you to focus on is she's trying to get that roughly around $42,000. So if she was taking out $42,000 from the IRA on the 72T program, when we ran this calculation before, it came out to about $42,483. In order for her to get the tax equivalent or net equivalent effect of that, if she were to simply just say, hey, I don't know if I want to do this for 7.5 years. I want to take it as, year by year, and I'm willing to pay that 10% penalty. Well, now we have to gross up the amount so that she can actually net the same income. And in this case, she's having to take out close to about $8,000 more just in order to net the same amount under these scenarios. Now you fast forward, and she's done that for 7.5 years. We look at the differences here. The total taxes on the 72T is about $118,000. And if she were just taking withdrawals and paying the 10% penalty, it'd be about $173,000. So what's that, about $55,000 or so more in taxes. And to make matters worse, if we were assuming that, hey, she's getting an 8% growth rate, and we were going to be able to invest those tax savings, and the difference would be at the 59.5, she'd be looking at a little bit over $1,028,000 versus 954,000. So again, math on the fly, that's what, about $75,000 difference or so, roughly in there. And if you perpetuated that out 15 years, you can see it kind of exacerbates the difference, 1.76 million versus about 1.63, so about $130,000 difference by doing this. But again, keep in mind, it also means you're paying less to the IRS, and you're getting your fair share of what's yours. So again, these numbers are going to change month by month, but the good news is the IRS put in that 5% kind of a benchmark, so they can only get better than 5%. And what that does for us is that gives us more flexibility in structuring these, so we're not having to kind of lump the entire IRA into one 172T and creating unnecessary restrictions. So let's take a look at some different variations of what we could see this potentially play out, and different aspects of, okay, can I stop my 72T? What happens there? Can I add a new one? Can I take an H55 withdrawal? We'll go through all those different scenarios and kind of show you how they potentially play out, because anybody that's doing this may run across one of these, and we want to make sure you understand them. But again, this is only for those of you that are looking to potentially tap into your IRA money prior to the age 59.5 without that 10% penalty. So scenario one, let's assume that somebody in this case has got $400,000 in an IRA, and they're looking to take out, let's say it looks like $15,000 a year in this situation. It doesn't, maybe they're 55, so they got 5 more years. Maybe they're 54, so they got 5.5 more years, still 59.5. Whatever it may be, the case in point is they need 15,000. So we'll go to the calculator, we'll look at the IRS tables and figure out, okay, in this simple example, it's only going to take a $250,000 portfolio to not generate, but in order to qualify for that 15,000 a year. So what we'll do is we'll split those. We'll take that 400, kind of split it, maybe do 250,000 or whatever the calculation comes out to in a 72T IRA. Doesn't mean we have to change the investment structure, just means that's what's used to calculate out in order to get that $15,000 a year in order to avoid the 10% penalty. And that remaining 150 stays in a different IRA, and you can tap into that or let that grow as you see fit. But in this situation, let's assume that person did that and they realized maybe 2 years into it, they said, hey, I'm tired of being retired, I want to go back to work, and they get a great paying job. So now they're actually in a decent tax bracket, and they're taking the extra 15,000 a year that they don't need. They may go back and say, look, I'm going to work this job for a couple more years. There's no need for me to take 15,000 out for the next 3 more years or so. And they say, I just want to stop this. And if they stop that, then what happens is the IRS can go back and retroactively say, hey, well, you took $30,000 out. You didn't fulfill your end of the bargain and do this for 5 years or 59.5. So we're going to charge you a 10% look back penalty or $3,000 on this. And it may or may not be the best situation for this individual. So again, it's something to look at one-on-one if this time comes. And on the flip side, let's assume this same individual did this structure and they set that 250,000 up in order to get that 15,000 a year for the 72T. And then in the 3rd or 4th year or somewhere in there, they kind of came to the conclusion that, hey, I got to get a new car or something, or there's for some other reason they wanted to do another 72T. And I'm just going to assume for the simple math here, we got one that's going to show generating $6,000. So let's assume they went out and had to buy a new car. Their old one broke down and they were done with it, and they had a car payment of $500 a month. It's kind of hard to find those nowadays, but let's assume it was a $500 a month car payment. They said, look, I'm going to keep paying this for at least 5 years anyway, so let's just do a new 72T. So they supplement that. So now they've got 15,000 on one side and they got a 6,000 on the other. So they're getting that $21,000 a year without the 10% penalty. Still paying taxes, but no 10% penalty. And they still got another 50 grand or so, give or take market fluctuations, that can be tapped into for a rainy day if they need to. But if they tapped into that, that would be the 10% penalty. So let's look at another situation. Let's assume that somebody says, hey, I start that $15,000 a year 72T, and I don't need something recurring, but I did come across a situation where I need to help out the kids, or maybe there's the roof needs to be repaired or whatever it may be. There's a one-time expense, and in this case, let's assume it's $10,000. So somebody calls me up and says, Wesley, look, I know we've got this 72T running. I know we can't break that or do anything there, or else they'll come back and penalize us. But I need to take out 10 or 12,000 or $8,000 or 15,000, whatever it is, to pay something. What are the options there? So we'll go through that option and say, okay, well, if it's truly is a one-time situation, then it might make sense just to bite the bullet, pay the 10%. So in this case, somebody takes out $10,000, it's going to cost them an extra 10% or an extra 1,000. But that may be a better situation than locking themselves into another 5-year 72T. So just keep that in mind as well. But again, the one thing to keep in mind is we've done this countless times. We understand the process. So any of these things are run by us, so you don't make any mistakes. And then this is one we actually come across more often because, again, as I mentioned before, acting as fiduciaries, we're always going to address the age 55 rule if you're leaving the company, you turn 55 or later. And even though it's going to benefit us more for you to roll everything over to an IRA, if there's potential need to tap into something, we're going to tell you to leave at least something over in that 401k so you can tap into it without the 10% penalty. So in this case, this would have been something, maybe this example, this person retired at 56 or something, and we told them, hey, you might as well, instead of us setting up a 72T, you've got flexibility to take withdrawals from your 401k. So let's leave $100,000 over there because you don't think you're going to spend that in the next 4 or 5 years. So let's just leave that. And assuming this person, let's say they tapped in, I need my glasses on. Let's say they tapped in first year, they took out 21,000. Second year, they took out 16,000. And that third year, they took out 23,000. But let's assume that maybe they've got there are some 401k plans we work with that are not that flexible and only give you one withdrawal per year. So let's assume they took this withdrawal in March and they've already spent through that 23,000 or something's come up, and same situation, maybe they need to take out more, and maybe it was for a car purchase or something. So now we can take that $300,000 IRA that we're managing right now, and we can split that and look at another 72T or look at a 72T to supplement the age 55. So now you've got that flexibility. You've got the flexibility to kind of take what you need without the 10% penalty from the 401k, and then you've got that structured 72T on the IRA side. And then, not to get complicated, but if you need a further breakdown of that 200, that's something that can be done later on as well. But the goal is to keep it as simple as possible and kind of adhere towards those rules. So I know went over some basic examples, but it can get more complicated. So just give us a call and we can dig into that. But for those of you that haven't talked with us in a while, a quick reminder who the retirement group is. We are an independent financial advisory firm that focuses on working with Fortune 500 companies, helping you understand your company benefits plans prior to retirement. We've been doing this for over 30 years, so we've got a great understanding and knowledge of a lot of the specific company plans. And one of the great things about us is, if you need to sit down face to face, we can probably accommodate you. But obviously, post-pandemic, a lot of these conversations will be had, via web meetings, phone calls, email, whatever your preferred communication is. Just let us know. But there's really no way to truly kind of get a gauge for how these play out unless we run a cash flow analysis, and that's actually something that's complimentary. We provide you prior to retirement and post-retirement, but before we can give you a suggestion on that 72T, or before we can give you an investment allocation suggestion for working with you, we need to know the facts and know what you're looking to achieve. So that's where we gather data like your 401k balance, what's your desired retirement spending, run a Social Security projection, things like that, to come in and essentially run a detailed cash flow analysis for you to show you, are you on the right path to meet your goals? And then and we'll be able to tell you, can you retire at the time you want? Could you retire earlier? Do you need to work later? What's the best way to address the pension? Do you need to take a lump sum or take the annuity? We can go through all those different options, but it also can tie into the 72T, where we can model that in for you so you can see how that plays out as well. And to be honest with you, right now, about 3/4 of Americans over 50 don't even have a written plan. So if you can spend about maybe 10 to 15 minutes with us gathering some of that data I just mentioned, give us about a week or so to put together a pretty detailed plan, and we'll get that back to you. And we'll set some time to go through that and answer any questions you have on there. But like Samantha said, we got a couple QR codes up here. So if you want to jump in, use your phone to get into our LinkedIn side to follow along with us or get specific updates on your company plans, or schedule a meeting with myself or one of the other retirement group advisors. You can get to that our calendar through that other QR code. And old school, just feel free to give us a call at 800-900-5867 or email us at info@theretirementgroup.com. And with that, I think we're kind of wrapped up. So I don't know, Samantha, do we have any questions come through in there?
Hey, Wesley. Yes, we did. Did you
Okay.
forget about me for a second? Okay. First question. What happens if I take a larger distribution than the estimated SEPP RMD? Or what other options do I have?
Okay, so let's go back to one of those examples where somebody set that up, and I'll use the one we did, the 400,000, because it's easier, and they took 15,000 each year. Let's assume that they went in there and didn't call us up, didn't know the process, or maybe set up with somebody else or did on their own. And that third year, they needed more, so they just said, I can't take 50, I'm going to take 20. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. It's your money. We're here to kind of semi-police you or let you understand the rules. But in that case, if they took out that $20,000, then they broke the 72T agreement with the IRS. So now they've taken out 15 the first year, 15 the second, and 20 the third. So that's 30. So that's $50,000 they've taken out. And they broke that contract with the IRS. So the IRS can come back in there and penalize them 10% of that 50,000. So that's again why it's really important to give us a call, because it may be beneficial to separate, take a different distribution. But if you go over or under, it can be $1. Then you essentially break that. So it's very important to understand that transition. And one other thing, kind of add, we didn't really talk about this, but there's we do a lot of work with companies that have pensions. If you have a lifetime income stream or a pension or something like that, that can get paid out earlier because it's a lifetime. So really the three issues are the 5 years, 59.5, and or lifetime annuity. So keep that in the back of your mind as well.
All righty. Thank you, Wesley. Number two, how would you compare a 72T to the rule of 55?
Okay, so we went over one of those examples, but the rule of 55 gives you more flexibility, assuming your 401k has that. Like I mentioned, most 401ks are fairly flexible, give you the ability to take out, one withdrawal per month or something like that. There are some we work on that only give you 1 or 2 a year, so you need to budget that. But there's no hoops to jump through. You call up Fidelity, call up Voya, call up whoever's the record keeper of your 401k plan, and say, hey, I want to take out, if you retired at 55 or later, or the year you turn 55 or later, you call them, say, hey, I want to take out 20 grand. Now the difference there, just keep in mind, is it doesn't matter what your tax bracket is, they have an automatic 20% withholding. So if you're in the 12% tax bracket, you're essentially going to give the IRS an interest-free loan of about 8% of that. So if you say, hey, I want to take out $20,000, you're only going to get 16, because they're going to withhold 20% of that. So if you need 20, you need to gross that up and take out 25. So just be aware of that. But the rule of 55 gives you more flexibility as far as how to access that money versus 72T. That's going to give you more flexibility on investment style and options within an IRA, but it's going to be very strict as far as how to get to it. But on the flip side, you can actually withhold your what your true tax bracket is. So if you're in a 12% tax bracket, you can withhold 12%, which means there's less you have to take out, and you can save more in there to grow versus working towards the IRS's bottom line.
All righty, thank you. Last one, Wesley. Before I ask you this question, I want to just remind everybody that after this presentation is ended, you will be redirected to our homepage at theretirementgroup.com, where you can book an appointment with Wesley, or you can use one of these QR codes he still has up on the screen to get in contact with him. Follow us on LinkedIn. Please use those resources. All righty, Wesley, last question. Will my Social Security benefits be affected by the 72T distributions?
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, no, and hopefully that stays the same. But to be honest with you, there's no correlation. Doesn't matter if you've got, nobody has this, but if you got $2 million coming out a year from a 72T, doesn't affect Social Security. Now down the road, if there's a means testing, that could be one situation. But to be honest with you, I don't see how it could affect it unless, because at 59.5, nobody's collecting Social Security at that point. The earliest you can collect is 62. So the only way you could think about it affecting would be, let's say if somebody started 72T at 58 or 59, there might be a year or two crossover there. But even at that point, doesn't matter how much income you're bringing in, the Social Security is separate of that. So no effect. Okay.
Alrighty, Wesley, that was it. That was all we had for today. Any last words of wisdom you'd like to leave us?
No, just that disclaimer again, that we've worked extensively with a lot of the companies. We've got a deep understanding of your situations, but doesn't mean we're endorsed by your company. But give us a shot, give us a call. We'll be happy to answer any of your questions and dig as deep as you want to on that. But I would stress, if somebody is leaving, especially before 55, but also before 59.5, to give us a call. Make sure you get kind of an unbiased look and a fiduciary standpoint on what your options are and how to structure this if you're trying to tap into it, because I can't tell you, unfortunately, how many mistakes I've seen after the fact where somebody's come to us when it's too late, and we have to bear bad news on some of that.
Yeah, definitely. All righty, Wesley. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Wesley, for your time, and we hope to see everybody again soon on another webinar. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.